Hey kids, so in the past we have covered in our different DevOps Day sessions Power Apps in DevOps, we've done flows in DevOps, we've done environment variables in DevOps, haven't covered Power Virtual Agents yet, that's coming, but today we're going to cross over into a different pillar of the Power Platform and do DevOps for Power BI. Let's check this out. Okay, so let's kind of set context here, give you an idea of what I have. First and foremost, this is Power BI, as you've seen before, and what I have is really simple. We have two workspaces, you can see here, oops, prod and test, and we're going to look at our test workspace, of which I have two reports. Test report WS test and test report 2. Nothing special in these reports, they are just reports. Very simple, basic, just enough to prove the point. But I kind of want to give you the lay of the land over what it is we have here. But what I want to do, and this came from an assignment I had, but I thought you guys might like to at least see how it's done, is take these reports and do two things with them. First, put them into a source control environment, preferably with some sort of date stamp. And again, for the Git people out here who have better ways to do repositories than I do, I would love to hear your comments about how to do this better. But for today, we're going to do it in a very old school way and simply get them into folders based on the date that they were put in place in Azure DevOps. The second thing we want to do is take a report from our test workspace and push it to a production workspace. So we not only have our source control, but that CI/CD pipeline that takes us from development to production. All right. So we have that here. I just want to give you this space and show you what we have and show you the end result. So as you see here, now we're in Azure DevOps, and I have built in my repository a Power BI folder, nothing special, and a folder for one of our reports. This is from my earlier test, and as you can see here, there are subfolders for each based on the date and time that this particular pipeline was run. And we can see from underneath, we have our PBX file in place in Azure DevOps. So that's kind of the goal of what we're going to do today. But what we will see here once we have this is that we'll also take our report and move it from test to production. So if you have reports that people really like and should not be messing with, this will give you a way to make a pristine production environment, which will be read-only for most people, and a test environment where they can manipulate, develop, alter their reports as they need to be, and then of course push into prod when they're ready. All right, so let's get started. And since we know the report we're building, let's go ahead and build a new folder for our particular repository, our particular report. Give it its temporary file and go ahead and commit that. And that gives us the base location for our report. Let's get started. First thing we need, first and foremost, we are going to build an enterprise application. This is going to run in ADO, and it is not going to run under one of our accounts. So if you've seen the previous videos that I've built for DevOps, we have built enterprise applications for applications, right? So we had one for Power Apps, and we used that to act in our proxy to go out to the Power Platform, download our solution, and put it into Azure DevOps, and of course then put it to a different environment. We're going to do the same here. I'm not going to go through how to create one because we've done that before. But what I do want to show you, as you can see I have one here, when you build these and we use them in, for example, the Power Apps one, we granted certain permissions to these enterprise applications to give them extraordinary rights within the particular application. For example, with the Power Apps, they're essentially admins, they can go do what they want to. When we go to permissions here on this one, you'll see that I have tenant read write. And the options, if you go to application registration and you add a permission, you will see what is available. We're going to choose Power BI service, and you see we have two options: delegated permissions, which gives you can get very granular with, or application permissions. Now I've done application permissions, but I'm going to tell you a secret. For what we're doing today, doesn't matter. None of this matters. When it comes to Power BI, what you set here does not grant explicit access to Power BI. I know, right? So I have set it to tenant read and read write all because I have future plans for it. But for this application, we do need one. But we do not really care what this is because Power BI doesn't care either. What we have to do, however, is slightly more annoying. So we've built our enterprise application. What we need to do next, foremost, is build a group for this account. I have here a list of my groups, and I have built one PBI Enterprise Apps. This is just an Azure security group. Ideally, I would give it an email address, but that's up to you, but I'll tell you why in a minute. But you need to put your enterprise application in this group. Because if we go to Power BI administration, in the admin portal, this is step one. If we go to our admin portal and we go to our tenant settings, we will scroll down here and we will get to developer settings. And the first one we have to care about, and really the only one we have to care about, is allow service principals to use Power BI APIs. And flipping this switch allows Power BI to be called by an enterprise app. Okay, it's not global, but notice here that it says specific security groups, of which this is where you add, that's step one, this is where you add that group. And there are others here, allow service principals to create and use profiles, and allow principals to use read-only APIs. We don't need them for this. But both of these, if we look, when we enable them, require the groups. And therefore, you really need to go ahead and just put it in a group. The next thing we're going to need before we do anything, we're not there yet. We do not have access yet. The next thing we need to do is with that group, go to Power BI itself into the workspace, go to access, and grant that group access. This is true for both the test and production. So the APIs can be called by that switch, but there's no global rights no matter what you do so far in the Power BI world. So you have to put the group you just made in each workspace, not for each report thankfully, but for each workspace that you want this pipeline to interact with. Okay, again, not my favorite thing, but this is what it's going to take. You will get the 403 permission error for forbidden if you try and do this without granting explicit access by group. All right, so that's what you have to do. Build an enterprise application, put that application in a group, flip the switch in Power BI admin, and then grant that group permissions to the workspace. Once you got those four things, now we can go to Azure DevOps. Did you get all that? I hope so. Okay, so let's take a look at what it is we need to be doing. All right, so I guess the first thing we need to cover is the tool set for this in Azure DevOps. Okay, like everything, we go to the marketplace, and there are a couple Power BI ones, but this is the one that I have found the most success with. Now, Microsoft seems to like one of the other ones, but this particular one does the one thing that I needed for this particular exercise, and that is the export function. This is the tool set that has an export. It has an import too, so that'll complete our particular Power BI CI/CD pipeline, but export is what counts here. So go there, go to the marketplace, get the Power BI build tools by Bob Gwittinger, him, and go ahead and get that installed in your Azure DevOps project. Okay? When we have that, now we can go ahead and get things built. So we'll take a look. This is our completed pipeline. I'm going to show you the steps, and then we'll go ahead and build one. There is some PowerShell. There's two levels of PowerShell, one that's a bit of setup and one that commits to Git. The commit to Git you've seen in previous. And this one is really simple. There's a tool installer, no big deal. There's an export, and then I've renamed it, there's an import. And that's all we're going to put together. So let's go ahead and build one, and we'll see how this works. We're going to create a new pipeline. I go to the classic editor because I am not good with YAML yet. We're going to do an Azure Repos Git. Now again, this is where your personal preference or requirements for your repository will take over. For this example, I'm just pulling from main. Okay, you can fix this however you want to. I would love to hear in comments the preferred way to do this, but for right now, I'm going to go with main for simplicity. And I'm just going to build an empty job. We have our agent, which we can come here, we can go ahead, PBIC, name it whatever you like to. There is one thing that you need to do, and that is click allow scripts to access the OAuth token. This was the same in the Power Apps one, this is the same here. And before we do anything, we are going to create a variable. And I'm going to put this here as build date time. And I'm going to leave it blank. If you remember from when I went over this earlier, I am building folders within my repository that will have that are named via a date time stamp, because I want to be able to visually see the report at any given moment. I know Git could probably handle this in a better way. Again, please tell me how. But for this example, because I thought it was interesting, we're going to go ahead and build that particular folder structure, and for that we're going to need a variable. So that's what this is going to be. Now let's go ahead and get our tasks added. First thing, if we go to PowerShell, we're going to add one, and it's going to be inline. And now the code we're getting here, let me bring this over really quick. This is the code we're working on today. And it's got a little bit of Git to it, so I wanted to show you. First and foremost, we're getting a date. All right, this is the format, something that is organized alphabetically with year, month, date, hour, minute. With that, if we expand that out some, we are going to set, you can see here, this VSO task set variable. This is the PowerShell that looks back into Azure DevOps and sets a variable. So we are going to set build date time to our date variable. So that stores the moment the pipeline begins. All right, it may take a couple minutes, but we'll know here from the moment it starts, and that gives us our variable. Some of these things are similar to the other check-in that we saw previously, and we will see it again here, but you see some quick git config. It needs an email, it needs a name, not the legitimate name. The email address is needed. The name can be anything. We do a checkout and a pull. We make a directory. So in this case, I have the root PowerBI folder. I have the folder based on the name of my report. And then I have the variable date. We're going to make that and change to that directory. Next, Git cannot have empty folders. So you need to put something there. And again, please let me know, but I have read that the .keep is a semi-standard within the Git community for a empty file that's more of a placeholder. So we're going to touch it, add it, and commit it. So that builds us our subfolder and puts a placeholder in place inside Azure DevOps. So we're going to take this and we are going to drop that here. Now I'm not using test report WS. If we go here, I am using test report 2. So we are going to change that, and yes, this should be a variable. Sorry. Okay. So that will set up some preliminary housekeeping for our Git repository. Next, we are going to go to our Power BI, and we are going to export. Well, we need our tool installer. That's going to go first, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to need our export, and let's get that started first. The tool installer doesn't do anything. It just loads some preliminary things, so you just sort of drop that in with no change. Export, on the other hand, will need some work. Now, one thing I forgot to set up with you guys is the connection. And as you see here, it does have a connection listed. You will need to build a service connection within Azure DevOps. And that goes here under service connections. You will build a new service connection. You will pick, in this case, the lighter of the two. I have the other tool set in, but in this case, for our particular tool set for the marketplace, you pick Power BI. You move yourself out of the way. And this is where you will put in the information from your enterprise application. It's going to be a service principal. You fill that out, and then you have the connection available to you. We did this in our DevOps series. As you can see, we have that here. Once that is built, we need to go to our repository, and of course, under security, you will see the build service. You grant that contribute. So that's kind of the bookkeeping for that. My apologies for waiting too long in there. However, when we have our service connection built, it will go here. That is the way that this will talk to Power BI, essentially granting us access to that service account. And then we give it a path. Now we see here, oops, I'm in the wrong one. We pick our workspace, which in this case is test space workspace. I'm in the wrong one. Okay, once we have our connection in place, we give it our workspace name, in this case test workspace, because we're pulling from our test environment. We have to give it the the report name. WS report 2, which was done, test report 2. I'm having a day. So that's the name of our report. We want to export it in our case, PBX, but it does give you options depending on what you want to export it as. We're going to keep it in the Power BI format. And then we need to give it the path to where this is going. Okay, so we have our workspace, our report, our format, and then where it's going to go. And that is here. So again, we're in our repository, Power BI. We have our folder name based on the report, and then we have a folder name that we built in our PowerShell of the date time. Okay, so now we've got our export. Next, let's go ahead and commit that to source control. So we go back here. We pick up some more PowerShell. And in this case, we're going to do a different script. And this one is very much what was in our Power Apps commit code. So again, same as before, we are a username and an email. We check out, we add them, we have a comment, and then of course, we go ahead and add this last line in, which gives us our final commitment, and that will take, in this case, our inline code. That gives us our final commitment to Git. So the files are going to be stored and checked in, committed, everything we need to. So at this point, we have source control. So if you don't have a production environment that you're pushing to, we're done. This will run, this will generate the folders, this will put everything in Azure DevOps. So let's go ahead and queue that and let's take a look. I'm in the way again. Nothing special in the settings, we're just running it. There we are. Let's take a look. And once we get our job in queue, we'll see. So let's give it a minute. Be right back. Okay, as we can see, the light's green, the trap is clean, we have succeeded. Let's take a look at the repository and see what we have. So we see here, we have our folder, boom, we have the timestamp, and we have our PBX report. So we are good. We've achieved source control. So now let's take that to the next level real quick and work on getting that to a different environment. All right, so we go back to our pipeline. Let's go edit. And now the step that we want to add, if we go back to Power BI, is import. You can have it on either way. fact, we're going to put it below so we could separate the two. We pick our connection. Now the destination workspace, we are going to want, I believe I set it to prod. Prod. And see, we do not have it there. So we will put it prod. And now we need the path of where we are going. So we are going to say U. Now this path, as you see, has the ability to say a file, a folder, but we are just going to do a file. So we are going to go get .pbix, and that's it. So this will take our report from our stored location and we're going to push it to production. So let's go ahead and do that. See you in a minute. All right, we are done. Let's go take a look at Power BI. So we see here we are in production. If we refresh, it was there, but I hit refresh anyway. Boom, test report 2 with our data set coming in, and we have a single bar report. Say it's not pretty, but it came over. And that's it. So I hope that helped. Hope this is useful to you. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.